Welcome to Our View, the podcast, where we're changing the conversation about disability one story at a time. Here at Our View, we're all about education, awareness, and shifting perspectives. With each episode, we dive into honest, meaningful conversations with individuals from across the disabled community, amplifying voices, sharing lived experiences, and challenging the way society sees disability. Because disability isn't a limitation, it's a part of the human experience. So pull up a seat and join us as we broaden the view and bring real, powerful stories into focus. This is Our View. I would like to welcome everyone back to a new episode of Our View, the podcast, where we aim to educate, raise awareness, and change the tone of conversation about disabilities. Today, my guest on the podcast is Nieta. So, Nieta, thank you for joining me for this conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. To get started, can you tell us about yourself? Tell us your story and who is Nieta?
So, my name is Nieta Greene, and I am a person who was born with a disability. My disabilities started off as learning disabilities. I Learning disabilities, any form of neurodivergence, I pretty much have it. So, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia on that autism spectrum. If it's neurodivergence, there's a good chance I have it. Uh, and so that was me as a little kid in the 1980s. And as a kid in the 80s, I say this all the time because my neurodivergence presented more like how boys' neurodivergence presented. They were concerned that something was wrong. So I first got diagnosed, which is now known as ADHD, with hyperactivity, and it just progressed from there. I was always pulled out of class for either some sort of accommodation I needed or some sort of extra help. And then when I finally got like my full diagnosis of dyslexia and dysgraphia, I had started doing resource room every other day because I didn't want to do resource room every day in middle school because I wanted to take Spanish, and this was the late 80s. And so this was before the ADA. And so they didn't have to, they had to give you accommodations, but they had a right to do it the way, any way they wanted to. There was none of this like, we are going to give you accommodations, but you don't need to be pulled out. That wasn't a thing. And so I ended up not being able to take music and art in seventh grade and eighth grade. Because I went to resource room every other day. And then in ninth grade, I went every day because it was a transition. And then I stopped going in 10th grade. And all of that was because I had a parental unit, my mom, who was very supportive of my choice, right? Like my mom was one of those parents was like, sometimes the path to least resistance, at least with me, was like, okay, no. Like if she doesn't want to do it, what can we do to make it easy to get stuff done? And the easiest thing at the time, because I really didn't want to go to resource room, and I was actually a really bright kid too. So I would be in higher level classes for certain types of things and lower level classes for other things. So that's how they figured out I had a learning disability. That the divergence was just getting too large for them to just say, well, to ignore it. And so when the ADA got passed, they had no choice to accommodate because by that point, state and local governments were required to follow the law in the same way as the federal government was. And so that's how I've been in this life ever since, really advocating for myself. And then I did mental health peer advocacy. I also have uh, some mental health disorders, and then some of them actually due to head trauma that I suffered before I was 21 years old. And then obviously I have some physical disabilities now, uh, actually also due to the effects of head trauma that I had. My neurological system is so messed up now that I have something called functional neurological disorder, which is the opposite side of the same coin as MS, which basically MS is the brain has all these lesions on it with FND. That's what they call it for short. The brain and the nervous system don't communicate properly. So right now, like you can't see it, but I'm actually holding on to my rowing machine because I'm struggling with sitting up today. And so that's the type of things I have to navigate. Sometimes it's some days with disability, it's more physical stuff. And then some days it's more of the neurodivergence, and some other days it's more of the mental health piece. Every day is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get, as they said in Forrest Gump. So I wanted to put that disability reference in there. I I also have a very dry sense of humor, so if it wasn't funny to anybody, I get it. So I hope that clears it up.
Yes, it does clear it up. And thank you so much for sharing so much of your story with us. And I definitely got the joke there, so I thought it was funny. But yes, as you said, it is every day living with a disability and living with multiple disabilities. Every day is you never know what you're going to wake up to and how you're feeling. And as you shared with me before we started recording, having a busy schedule can be very tough for people with disabilities. So, we find ways to adapt and push through, which is always good for us to keep pushing through. But then we also have to know when it's time for us to take a break as well and to get our rest, because that is always so important. So thanks again for sharing so much of your story. And I wanted to get into the next question, which is if you're watching this on YouTube, we can see your logo behind you as your backdrop there. So what inspired you to create Disability Community for Democracy and the nonprofit Disability Supporters for Democracy? Can you share, what your thought was in creating both of these organizations?
So, Disability Community for Democracy was literally the election results, and I was like, uh-oh, spaghetti-o. Uh, Another 80s reference from one of my favorite foods as a little kid. I used to love spaghettios, but it was literally, uh-oh, spaghetti-o. And I'm gonna just be honest, I didn't really trust any of the legacy disability organizations to really do anything significant around moving the ball forward. And I really wanted it to be intersectional in ways that we haven't done a good job as a community. I come out of the mental health space, so I wanted the organization to be 100% peer run, which in the general disability space, that doesn't happen. So I wanted that piece of my experience in this organization, that it needed to be 100% for us, by us. And it didn't matter what kind of disability you had. It didn't matter where you were on the political spectrum, because I know there are some disability organizations that are progressive, and I'm like, no. Basically, I don't care if you're moderate conservative like myself or you're a leftist. If you the only thing that matters in terms of what's happening right now and the work we're doing with Disability Community for Democracy is we're fighting for disability issues, because no matter where you're at on the political spectrum, we pay an extra tax, right? And that if you are part of other marginalized groups, if you're a person of color, you're an immigrant, you're a member of the LGBTQ community, you're heterosexual but gender non-conforming, there's other marginalizations you deal with, right? So So that's kind of sort of like why I wanted to do this. I really wanted it to be intersectional. So we have 4 buckets. We call them buckets because I like the bucket brigade. And I was that little kid who loved to pour things into one bucket or another. When I was really little, especially going to the beach, I used to do that and pour the sand on my head and stuff. So the bucket brigade was like, okay, let's call them buckets. And we have 4 of them. We have the grassroots bucket, the framing bucket, which is our messaging bucket, our legal and policy bucket, and our campaigns bucket, which we focus on political campaigns and trying to build bridges with them so they can have staff and outreach and listen to our issues, right? We want to be able to build relationships not only when they're in elected office, but if they're running for office as well, because we want to be able to support them. Grassroots is us building relationships with disability and non-disability organizations. And our legal and policy is our lobbying and bill writing portion of what we do. And then people were like, "Oh, do you do other things around civic engagement like voting?" And we're like, "That's not what we do here, right?" Like Rev Up exists for that. But people were like, "Real, you really need to have that part of things if you're gonna do the whole like engaging people." So it's like, well, we don't do education. We do uh we do more of the lobbying piece and the quote unquote C4 type of work, disability community for democracy. So I was like, okay, disability supporters could, that's why disability supporters were started. So we could do specific projects on specific different types of disabilities to get them to be educated on how to vote. Like on the whole civics process from registering to vote to voting to potentially running for office and what resources are there for them.
That's fantastic. I love that explanation. I love the buckets. That's such a great way to explain things, and the way you came up with that, as you said, with being at the beach, and that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that's really great.
Oh, can
The
I just add something to my
ab
answer?
Absolutely.
So the one thing I will say is that Disability Supporters is actually a subsidiary nonprofit of Disability Community for Democracy. So it's under one umbrella, but because of
Mhm.
the type of work and the tax laws in the United States, and we're in the process of getting our C3 for disability supporters, we had to separate the two because
Yes.
of the way the laws are. And I am a tax professional and I can't afford to be exposed in that way, especially in this political environment with who's currently in office.
Yes, yeah, you definitely have to be careful with with the laws of nonprofit and the nonprofit world for sure. Um, yeah, that was it's really great the work that you're doing, and just in the last few weeks of communicating with you to prepare for this, I've looked at your website and things, and just saw the work that you're doing. It's really needed at this time for sure, as you said, for the disability community to be educated in this space of voting and how the process works, and the important things that they all need to know. Preparing for, whenever it's time to vote, because the changes in policies affect our disability community and other marginalized communities greatly. So thank you for creating uh, these nonprofits, this organization to help fix some of the things and the gaps in knowledge that people might have. Um, so you talked about it pretty much already, but my next question is why do you think it is important that those in the disability community are part of the democratic process at all levels? And can you share some information about how people with disabilities, um, statistics about people with disabilities in voting?
Well, I will say that we need to be involved in the democratic process because I'm going to use an example that is happening currently. The Save America Act. right? They want to take away the ability to vote by mail. Now, I'm thinking about this as a person with a disability who does vote by mail, but if I had to, could go vote in person. Now, I vote by mail, and I'm saying this because it's a fact. I vote by mail because I don't know what my day, how I'm going to feel on election day. I could be sick, and then I'm going to the polls sick and cranky, and the stimulation from in-person voting makes it harder to concentrate. And at the time, before COVID, early voting was very difficult. I mean, we had it in my state, but it was very limited at where you could go, and the lines were long, and I was just like not interested. So when you had the ability to vote by mail, I decided to vote by mail. It was just way easier. And now they're like, oh, voting by mail is is corrupted and not right. Now, I used to live in Washington State. That was the only way you could vote was by mail. So you want to change the how people vote in these states because you didn't like the outcome of the 2020 election. That's what this is about. This is about suppressing the vote. So we need to be involved in the process because we talk a lot about the let's say the citizenship part and people not having a passport and all of that, but I'm thinking about it from an accessibility point of view. It's like, okay, I can afford to get a passport, right? That's not the issue. It's literally voting won't be accessible to me if I don't have the ability to vote by mail. And especially since I struggle with multiple disabilities, I need the time to be able to take my time to fill out my ballot correctly, or I will fill it out incorrectly and then it will be invalid. So I'm thinking about it for myself personally, and then I do the whole going out and how many people would not be able to go vote because of being housebound or even wheelchair bound, but transportation sucks and there isn't accessible transportation. So they might not have a ride to get to the polls. There's all of these things that I think about why we should be engaged. And people died. Like, like this was, this Voting Rights Act of 1965 is in my parents' lifetime. And and it was, I mean, I was born in the mid to late 70s. I mean, if that wasn't like that long before I was born, right? Like, and I think about that, right? Like, that wasn't too long before I was born. So it doesn't make sense. And also, people with disabilities, all of this stuff that they're trying to do, they're trying to undo like the HAVA Act and all of that stuff that made it more accessible for people to vote because they don't want people to vote because they want one party rule. So I am for you vote for who you vote for, but you don't have a right to cheat. So we need to be active at all levels. Also, we need to be active because nobody gets to hear from us. Now, I serve on my city's disability commission. And so if you're not active at your city, at your local level, politics is local, right? Like the federal government doesn't remove snow, for example. Your local government does. Your county government does, depending on what road it is. So you need to be active at all levels of government. If you're getting benefits, right? Like a Medicaid, for example, it's a state federal partnership, and we need to be active if you rely on any sort of community services, like for example, case management. Right? Case management is community-based services, which gets left out of the conversation. But for people like me who need case management services, I need to be involved in that conversation. Don't take case management away because I need help making appointments to go to the doctor. So it's really about making it about yourself and how it impacts your life first. And then when you tell your story and have you take something away from me, I won't be able to go to work. I'll be on benefits. I'll be on all of that. And I don't want to be on all of that because I can't go to the doctor and I can't do these things. Please don't take these things away from me. I just want baseline. I don't want anything special. I just want baseline. Give me baseline and let me do my thing. Now, there are people who get baseline and still need to be on benefits. That's fine, but not everybody on benefits is at baseline, and it's just because of the way society is and the way the healthcare system is. And so, it's wrong. So we need to make a lot of changes. So that's why I do this work is really about baseline, like give me the basics and then we could build from there. And the ADA is not even at baseline. Like the reality is unlike the Civil Rights Act where they do pattern and practices, for example, everything with the ADA is based on individual complaint. So because it was too expensive. And now back in the day that was fine, but now we're at a point in society where that's no longer acceptable. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of that, right? We need to do a lot of these things so we could have the same access to our rights being protected. And we get ignored if we don't because we don't have political power, which does not get talked about. People are like, "Oh, the ADA passed and we had the Supreme Court case that said we have a right to be placed in the least restrictive environment possible." We're done, right? I mean, that's basically in a lot of ways what happened, right? And then of course, they wanted to remove the R word from government, and that was in 2010s when that happened. But we went from from saying, okay, we're done, not realizing that we now have a current occupant and his co-conspirators, as I call them, who want to bring us back to to not even 1970, not even to pre-1973. They want to bring us back to where they can put us into wellness camps or lock us into institutions and use words that are outdated and think it's okay. So that's where I'm at and why I do this work.
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad you brought up the, like you said, the very current news of, um, trying to get rid of voting by mail. And as you said, like, so for myself, I use crutches. I also use a wheelchair. So if necessary, yes, I could go to the polls, and go into the long lines there because I can sit in my wheelchair and I can stand up long enough to get into, the voting booth if necessary. But voting by mail is very helpful and convenient for me because um, at election day for the presidency, at least is in November. Living in New Jersey, we could have snow, you know. So, knowing, like you said, just waking up that day on election day, you don't know what you will feel like. I don't know what I would feel like to have the energy to go to do that. So having the vote by mail option has been great for me. And then, as you mentioned as well, with people who depend on transportation. Is that transportation going to be reliable? And there's just so many factors to consider for that. So I'm glad you brought that up because that is, we're recording this February 16th. So, that is something that is very current in the news right now for 2026. And again, the work that you're doing is so important, and just having this conversation is so important because it is a topic that needs to be discussed. It's information that needs to be shared. So and again, as you mentioned a few times, it doesn't matter what political party is doing this. It's we have to look out for ourselves as people with disabilities, people of color, and other marginalized groups who are being impacted by decisions that are made. So again, this conversation is necessary to have, and I'm glad that we're here having it today. And to wrap up the conversation, can you share information about your website, social media handles, where our listeners can learn more about the work that you do, and any other resources that our listeners can, get to learn about having the disability community more involved in the democratic process?
So the best way to follow us is on Instagram. Uh, and you just type in Disability Community for Democracy, or you can type our handle DCDINC12, and that's our handle on Instagram and Threads. Facebook is just Disability Community for Democracy. We're also on Blue Sky. The other thing you can also do is you can subscribe to Nothing About Us Without Us, which is our newsletter. Well, it's more than our newsletter, it's actually our publication on Substack. And we you could become a paid subscriber. The paid subscriber, if you become a paid subscriber, actually supports the work that we do as Disability Community for Democracy, because we do not receive any grants or funding because of we are a nonprofit, but we are not tax exempt. And so that's why now disability supporters, we're still working on our social media there. So if you want more information about that, uh, you should follow neurodivergent voters on either uh, Facebook or on Instagram, which is the project of disability supporters. And you can get information on how to get involved with that project. You don't have to be neurodivergent to volunteer for that project, but that's our first project with disability supporters, our subsidiary nonprofit. And last but certainly not least, I will say this, you just, people in the disability community, I say this as a quip, but I do live by this. No one's coming to save us. We need to save ourselves. So, and however you decide to get involved, if it's with Disability Community for Democracy, is if it's going to your city council meeting or your local town board meeting, or going to your disability commission if your city, county, and state has one, or just being a poll watcher, right? Being a poll watcher, uh, anything. As long as they see us, they can't ignore us. And that's why the newsletter is called Nothing About Us Without Us, because if they see us, they can't ignore us. But if they don't see us, they can ignore us, and then they could institute policies that harm our community, aka the ugly laws that we used to have until 1974. That's not that long ago. Uh, that those went away a little bit before I was born. So it's important for us to think about that. And the last thing I will say is thank you for having me on, and I am grateful to have any opportunity to share about the work I do and myself. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This was a great conversation. As I said, a necessary conversation to have. So I encourage all of our listeners, all of our viewers on YouTube to please go and follow the great work that Nieta is doing. And the conversations must continue. And as you said, nothing about us without us. So it's great that you are leading this. This organization, and the work that you're doing is necessary. So thank you for sharing your story and all about the work that you do. And I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Our View, the podcast, where we amplify the voices and stories of those in the disabled community, one conversation at a time. If this story moved you, taught you something new, or sparked a different perspective, we'd love to hear from you. Write a review of the podcast on Apple Podcast and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Follow us on all social media platforms at Our View for Life 25. At Our View, we believe that disability is not a limitation. It is a powerful part of the human experience. So until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep seeing the world through our view.